Hey, what are we going to talk about today?
We're going to talk about how we picked labs.
Wow.
I would say we originally wanted to talk about the mistakes that we've made, but we realized that we made so many mistakes that it just makes more sense
Just integrate them.
into each episode and talk about the mistakes that we made with respect to each
Topic.
topic.
Yeah, no,
So,
absolutely. And today's topic is going to be a fun topic because some of you guys are hopefully experiencing this right now in our audience. And we're going to talk about how Nina and I picked our graduate study labs.
which is honestly, my story is not funny, but Anna's story is funny, in my opinion.
Well, I feel like as always, your story is going to be informative and it gives people like a good step by step of like
What I
what you could
did
do. And my story will be more chaotic and
and
full of wonderful learning opportunities for people who don't want to make the mistakes that I did,
Mhm.
but would rather hear about them. So I think
Yes,
that's again on brand with what we have to offer.
agreed.
So without
Okay,
further ado.
here it is.
But basically,
Okay.
picking labs, this is the time to do it because usually this happens, say, at the
Now
end of your first semester or first quarter in graduate school
or before. This is
or
okay, let's
before. Ooh, that's spicy. I like
well,
that.
okay.
I like that.
Thanks.
No,
It's
because
true.
this really, yeah, that's an interesting perspective. Let's
Well,
talk about it. Let's talk about the when.
when I say before, there are some schools that in different programs that you have to get accepted to the lab to get accepted to the
Ooh,
program,
that's very fair.
right?
Not what I was thinking about, but
Yes.
a very fair qualifier.
Yes.
Mhm.
And so I don't even know with chemistry programs if that is the case in anywhere. I have no idea if there's any program that you can pick the person beforehand.
I
I
would
don't know.
say, probably majority no, but let's keep in mind with the caveat that, yeah, some of you may already have picked your labs.
Yeah.
But I was actually, when you said that, what I
Mhm.
was thinking of was the fact that for some of us, we've picked our labs. You know what I'm saying? Like, even though you're not really
Yeah.
picking your labs until, like, maybe in a formal capacity until the
Yeah.
end of your first semester or quarter, like, for some people, they've really made that selection. Whether or
Yes.
not it's on paper or not, they've made
Mhm.
that selection. So that's fair that
Yeah.
for some people it's before.
Like, they've been working in that lab all summer before they started.
Or they're just that kind of person where they're
Mhm.
like, I'm only gonna be working for this person. I
Mhm.
know that I'm gonna be working for this person, and
Mhm.
potentially there might be even some backdoor shenanigans that,
Yes.
maybe you're not really allowed to openly talk about it, but
Mhm.
you've already essentially, made that decision,
Yes. I think that's
unofficially or not.
super fair.
Yeah, so I
Yes.
think that covers the caveats of when.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's not be too restrictive. We're just
Yeah.
talking about picking labs, and let's say, you're picking labs now, or, either during your first year or you're picking your labs prior to even starting grad school.
Yeah.
We just wanted to go over kind of what we thought about when we were picking labs and,
Mhm.
the experience, like the different issues that we ran into potentially.
Yep.
um, so I'm going to ask you first because I think you have the more straightforward
Yeah.
story. Picking labs.
When I applied to grad school, at all of the grad schools, I emailed a single professor that I was interested in working for. So I only applied to schools that had people I was interested in working for, and I only emailed one. And the reason I did that was because I didn't want them to go. I didn't want I didn't know how much the faculty talked. I didn't know if they would talk about who emailed them, and I just didn't want to seem like I was emailing every single person saying I want to work with you. I actually ended up emailing the person that I ended up working for. So I kind of knew that I wanted to work for him originally, but at Davis, there were 5 different professors that I was interested in working for.
Wow. That's a
So,
lot.
I know. But I mean, how are you gonna know? At UC Davis, we did rotations. There's a lot of schools that do rotations, and so I chose to rotate with those 5 faculty members.
Well, I say 5 is a lot because usually, like, when I was looking through schools, I
Mhm.
would be ecstatic if I could find more than one person that I was
Yeah,
even remotely interested in on paper,
yeah.
like, not knowing anything else, and all you have going off of it is maybe the website, which,
Right.
just as an aside, I think actually one of the good qualifiers,
Mhm.
because this is true whether or not you're looking into professors during your first year or
Mhm.
before,
Yeah.
really, as a graduate student or somebody thinking about going to grad school, what am
Mhm.
I looking at?
Yeah.
The research website.
Yep.
Am I right or am I right?
You're absolutely right.
I know you have some strong feelings about that.
I do.
What do you look for in a research website?
I look for how up to date it is. I genuinely, like,
Was
I'm
it
like,
made on a Windows 98 computer?
that's like, does it still look like Neopets? Like, I don't know. I'm
Basic HTML, or
yeah,
are we talking JavaScript animations? I
like,
mean,
do you use Squarespace? Like, are you use like, what are you using?
do I know where your links are?
Do you use Comic Sans? You know? Like
MySpace, glitter,
oh my
text.
gosh. I mean, there are some out of date websites. What's really interesting about academia and being a faculty is really like you do need to market yourself. Like you need to
Modernize.
modernize, I believe, at least. And I think these faculty want their work to speak for themselves
And some of them
itself.
maybe can.
Perhaps.
However, if you want to reach students that really,
Hmm.
don't know much about the
Yeah.
terrain, right?
Hmm.
Because a lot of us, to be frank, don't,
Yeah.
like, you gotta really make it easy for them
Yeah.
to get familiar with you, because these students are probably what you're applying to, like 10 places at once,
Yeah.
maybe on
Who
average.
knows?
Oh,
Yeah.
let's say 5 to 10 places at once, let's say,
Hmm.
on average. And, that's a lot of schools, a lot of departments, and a
Hmm.
lot of websites they're, like, sifting through in
Yeah.
order to get a sense of what you're doing and what your group is like and what the science is like. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
And not us talking directly to faculty saying,
literally not a single faculty member listening to this. But
yes.
also, like, I will say this, aesthetics is one thing,
Uh-huh.
but really at the end of the day, what I'm looking for is an easy to use website with
Function.
all of the right pieces of information,
Yeah.
right? And with the up to date publications,
Mhm.
because you can look at somebody's research statement and get a good sense of what they're doing. But what's even more informative, really, is what are they recently publishing,
Mhm.
and how often
How
they are
often?
publishing,
Exactly.
and in
Mhm.
what journals they're publishing. So
Yeah.
that those are the little things that I would probably look for in the nitty gritty. Especially once I've decided that I want to go somewhere
Yeah.
and I'm comparing the
Mhm.
faculty members within a different department.
Yeah.
I'll start zooming in a little bit and
Yeah.
doing a little bit of diagnostics. And if you can make it easy for me to do that on your website, that would be
Absolutely.
excellent.
'Cause you're looking at so many faculty when you're applying because
It's
you're
true.
that's how you're deciding where to go. But that's yeah, so websites are really important. I actually also I looked for the spread of diversity as well.
Ooh.
I think that's
Group
interesting. Group
photos.
photos will tell you like what like how big the group is, how small the group is, those kinds of things.
So update the
Yeah.
lab page, right? Like
Yeah.
update the lab members page,
Yeah.
because you really want everybody to understand like what your lab looks like right now.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I mean, diversity just not only from like, a, a very unilateral sense, but
Uh-huh.
also like, do you have graduate students at various skill levels, or
Yeah.
various like, do you have fifth years, fourth years, third
Mhm.
years, second years, and first years,
Yes.
or do you only have first years? Do you
Mhm.
only have really experienced or on their way out graduate students? That could
Yeah.
also be really informative, because
Mhm.
maybe somebody, they need to be prepared that
Mhm.
once they enter, they may or may not have like a senior graduate student above
Yes.
them for a very long time
Yeah.
before that person leaves. So, like, timing and things like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information that you can get.
So much information you can get, which I think that's gonna be more relevant to our episode where we talk about applying to graduate school, but that's a little aside about how we feel about websites. But the 5 people that I was interested, I will agree, that it is wild that I was interested in those 5 because I had I had no idea what I was looking for. I was looking at these websites, I was trying to see I didn't know what I wanted to do.
So
I had
what
no
what
idea.
made you like the 5 people then?
So I wanted to do something that was organic chemistry,
Mhm.
but also had some sort of biological relevance in theory
Right, because of your
because of my
industry
background
experience.
and
Yeah.
because like my undergraduate degree was in biochemistry. I liked med chem. That's what I had done. People doing either chem bio or people doing straight up organic synthesis. But the people who were doing chem bio, they had to have some organic synthesis because that's what I wanted to do. So it was, do I want to make compounds for the purpose of testing them biologically, or do I want to, just do straight up organic synthesis? And actually, at my job, what my boss had said was, this is take this with a grain of salt. I may have said this before, but my boss told me if you want to go into med chem, if you want to work in industry doing this, you want to become the best synthetic chemist that you can become. Learning about the biology is really interesting. Working on a chem bio project is really interesting. And people obviously did that and are very successful with that. But she said, you should try and become an expert synthetic chemist. And so that was the advice that I had received going in. So I was looking at, it was 2 chem bio people, and then 3 more synthesis people, or like what I thought.
Just to test the waters and,
Exactly.
see what's going on. And,
Yeah.
I feel like to elaborate that and to generalize that a little bit,
Mhm.
what you were touching upon is ultimately you're gonna whatever research lab you go
Mhm.
into, that's gonna dictate the day-to-day activities or research
Mhm.
activities you're doing and the skills you're gonna be accumulating
Yes.
over the next 5 years. And for you, that was organic synthesis.
That's
You
what I
really
wanted.
wanted to
Yeah.
prioritize that skill.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think that when you're looking into labs and you're
Mhm.
selecting labs, you wanna make sure whatever lab you're looking into and what you ultimately decide on is gonna give you base level the skills that you want, right, to
Exactly.
utilize later on in
Mhm.
life, whether it's because you like doing those research
Mhm.
activities or if it's because that will enable you to do the job that you wanna do in the
Yeah.
future.
Exactly, exactly. And so, yeah, that was how I chose the 5, and honestly, I had no idea, like, I had no idea what I wanted, and I know I made the right choice. I was very happy with my choice at the end, even all the way throughout my PhD, like, I never regretted my decision ever. And I think it's because I was very diligent with
And
testing the
thorough.
waters with everybody, because I did rotate with all 5 labs, and I, you know, made the right choice ultimately, so
Yeah, you did a really thorough job because, I think in our program, we were only required to rotate at minimum in 3
3.
labs, and
Mhm.
I know you had kind of went above and beyond and
Yeah,
done, like, hopefully interact with as many different people as possible before you
yeah.
made that decision, which I really, really admire about you because
Thanks.
that's not the approach that I took.
It's not. It's super not.
Um, because, like, I don't know, again, I think when you're starting this journey, you're gonna be presented with a lot of information.
Mhm,
We are 2 voices and probably a sea of voices that
mhm,
you have access to, hopefully, um, and that makes the decision kinda challenging. I don't
mhm,
know. I guess, like, a theme that I'm recognizing is that
mhm,
I oftentimes can get lost in that sea of, voices and different opinions, and, like,
mhm.
knowing who to trust is really important too.
Oh, yeah.
I think that the reason why I get lost is because I'm first generation and
Mhm,
there's really no one in my family that went into college
mhm.
and no one in my family, obviously, that ended up doing a PhD. So for me, I'm starting from basically scratch, and
Yeah.
this point will talk to anybody. I'll hear it from anybody. And, like, so my undergraduate advisor basically told me a few things. He instructed me that, I should look he told me to make a list of names.
Mhm,
He always does this. Make a list of names and then I'll gently let you know if these people are good or
mhm,
bad.
mhm,
So that's the way he didn't really wanna elaborate on why,
mhm.
but he would give me that guidance.
Yeah.
And so, he actually suggested that I applied to UC Davis because he knew the faculty that worked
Mhm.
there, and he knew that I would have good options.
Yeah.
And I knew that too. When I first started, I looked into UC Davis, and instead of looking at the faculty members that he had brought up to me, I actually noticed a new professor with
Mhm,
a research objective that I
mhm.
was really interested in and really passionate about.
Yeah.
And this professor was relatively early on in his career in
Mhm,
pre-tenure. So I had asked my undergraduate advisor about this
mhm,
because I had heard some people say that joining a pre-tenure
mhm.
lab has its challenges and has
Uh-huh.
its difficulties, especially if it's just starting out, because
Mhm,
you have like an uphill climb in the beginning of just
mhm,
doing the setup and familiarizing yourself with the work
mhm.
with like not many senior graduate students to help guide
With
you.
no senior grad, none.
In some cases, not.
Yeah.
And my advisor kind of echoed that. My undergraduate advisor echoed that and said, with new advisors, it's always a risk.
Yeah.
Like you will be very productive
Mhm,
because he said in his experience, some of his most productive students were his earliest students, you know? So
mhm.
he was like, you are going to be really productive. You will most likely be set up for success
Yeah.
just on paper.
Mhm.
But it is risky because some pre-tenure faculty, not every, pre-tenure faculty member will get tenure. That's
Right.
really stressful. And also, sometimes the workload might be heavier because the
Mhm.
pressure of getting tenure will be felt by
Super
the
high.
professor and
Mhm.
subsequently be felt by you.
Yes.
So I think he was trying to give me a little bit of like cautionary advice, or to
Mhm.
proceed with caution,
Yeah.
to which I listened to and proceeded to go, whatever. And
What do you know?
I mean, like, I didn't disrespect.
Yeah, no, I
I
know.
really respected his opinion because
Yeah,
he's obviously a really good. You know, he did his best to look out for me,
yeah,
absolutely. But I think I was kind of just enamored with the research,
yeah.
and also was like, oh well, you know, if I can take a little bit of pressure.
Yeah, I got it. That's so funny. I actually received the same advice from my boss as well. That was part of it. It's like, do
Yeah,
expert synthetic chemist. It's going to be tougher if you join a new lab. And
yeah,
that was advice that like I did. I think I shared that with you too.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, as much as I heard that from a variety of different
Yeah.
sources, I may or may not have listened to
Yeah.
everybody.
Which I also, to be completely fair, my husband, who we've also talked about 300 times already, he joined a new lab and thrived. I mean, did
Did very well.
amazing. And it was such a good experience for him. And so that's not to say that you shouldn't join a new lab. We received that advice. People are going to tell you all of these things. We're going to tell you things that we heard, and you don't have to listen to all of it.
Oh yeah,
Some
no,
of it's stupid.
you
Like,
make the decisions in
yeah.
your life, and if your gut tells you you wanna go after something, go after it,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Exactly.
I we can just tell you what we were told,
Yeah.
and I
And what
mean,
we experienced.
and I told you, I just didn't that was advice that I listened to and was like, "Yeah, I hear the bad stuff, but the good stuff sounds good, so
Yeah.
let's hope it's all gonna be the good stuff," and that's you know, it's always a risk there.
Yeah.
Everything's a risk,
Exactly. It
but,
really,
um, yeah, that was definitely one of the
yeah.
potential risks. I wanted to start early because the lab that I
Mhm.
was interested in at the time, it was a
Mhm.
new professor
Yeah.
who was relatively popular in terms of interests. Like there
Yeah.
were several people I knew who wanted to join this person's lab, and
Mhm.
I felt like competitively I
Yeah.
needed to get a head start. I mean, like for context, there were two students that actually started rotating in this person's lab before
In the
me
summer.
in the summer.
Yeah.
One of them really, really in the summer, like,
Yeah.
throughout the entire summer, I think, and one of them just, like, prior to me getting there.
Yeah.
And I actually out of all the people that were rotating at the time,
Uh-huh.
I was probably the last person to move there
I remember
because
that.
and here's the thing, moving privilege.
Moving privilege.
I did not have the privilege of moving to the city.
Mhm.
I did a coast to coast move.
Yeah.
No more. No
No
more
more coast
coast
to
to coast move.
coast.
I did a coast to coast move from New York to California, and, like,
Yeah.
I really it was tight for me. You know, I couldn't
Yeah.
afford to move there early.
But you know what's funny is I didn't even think about doing a summer rotation. I moved to Davis in July. I was just vibing, okay, for like a month and a half, studying for ACS exam, spending time in the city, vibing.
And and here's the other thing, just to
Yeah,
speak on, like, advice,
yeah,
sea of voices,
yeah,
people around me. My undergrad advisor, I wanted to work with him still over the summer, and he
mhm,
actually didn't let me. He was
yeah,
like, "You should stop working in lab in the summer." He didn't let me work in lab because he was like, "Before you start grad school,
mhm,
you need to take a little bit of a break so
yeah,
that when you start grad school,
yeah,
you really miss it and you wanna get back into it." That was the advice he gave me, to not
yeah,
start early. And this is advice that I will hear echoed throughout because, like, graduate students will say this to younger graduate
mhm,
students or first years as
yeah,
well, where it's like when a first year is like really like, I want to start immediately and I
yeah.
want to rotate immediately. A lot of the older graduate students are like, hold
Please
up,
enjoy your life while
no,
you still have it.
travel, you know, do something else.
Yeah.
You don't need to start right away. Again, there's always conflicting advice.
To be fair, I do think that I had received that advice, but I didn't realize how competitive things were.
There was a spot for everyone,
Yeah,
but not necessarily in their first choice lab, maybe. And I think
yeah,
that's what we were confronted with. And that's going to always vary.
it is.
In our in our respective fields, that always varies because the graduate year size always changes
Yeah,
and the funding conditions always change. And they can
yes.
change very rapidly for different
Mhm,
labs. So
yeah,
there's just never a guarantee. So, I mean, yes, there is a level of I guess I wanna temper everything by saying this is how things panned out for us.
right.
But, like, for you, you know, if you're gonna make a decision about whether or not to rotate early, or not, just, like, think about it really carefully. Think
Yeah,
about whether or not it's gonna pay off, right?
yeah,
Think about the risk versus the benefit and, make your own choice
yeah,
always at the end of the day. Also, do listen and talk to the older graduate students that
mhm.
are there because they probably have a better idea of how things are going to go down than you do and understand that.
100%, and that's what I did. I did my research. Okay, I talked to everybody, and one point of caution that I will also say is people are competitive for the students that they want too. You can't necessarily trust what people outside a group is saying about the group that you're interested in. You should listen and then draw your own conclusion, because that's what I did. Because the lab,
And what you mean by this, and just to
yeah,
clarify in case it isn't clear,
yeah,
it, it's the fact that like if you're really interested in a certain professor's lab and another lab really wants you,
yeah,
they might tell you certain things to dissuade you from
from
going
joining
to
that
a
lab.
different lab than theirs.
Because everyone is, for the most part, usually if you join a good lab, people are proud of that lab. They want you to join that lab, and if they like you, right? What, do you disagree?
I agree. I
Uh-huh.
mean, I think that I guess what we're trying to say and what it's starting to sound like, it's
What?
like a game of subterfuge. It's like you can't trust
You
anybody.
can't.
It's
You
like
can't
I feel so, which is like I don't know if
Yeah,
that's good advice, but okay, if it needs to be said, it needs to be
yeah.
said. Like
Well, yeah, it's
take
hard to,
everything with a grain of salt. Try to find
yeah,
unbiased opinions if you can, because I
yes,
think they're out there. Like I think
yeah,
there are people who are unbiased.
yeah.
You know, you just need to build that network and see if you can have access to it.
Yeah, and I think also from my experience, I was talking to all these people, I was getting all this information, and I had a gut feeling for what lab I wanted to join, but people were telling me not to join the lab, and I was so shook. I was like, "They're saying all these things about this lab, but that's not the experience that I had talking to the students, talking to the professor."
Yeah, like trust your I mean, yeah, do your own investigation
Yeah,
for sure. And like yeah, it's like journalism, right? Like you can't
yeah,
trust everything that everybody tells you.
yeah,
So you have to like talk to everybody and
yeah.
then try to distinguish fact from opinion.
Exactly, exactly, and I think we were also very lucky, like, the group when we joined was awesome. Like, they were really honest about the problems, and they were honest about the good things
Well,
too.
I wish I had a different experience than you.
Oh,
I
you're right.
didn't vet the group that I joined. I won't say that I vetted it because I didn't vet it.
The one you first joined.
No, the one that I joined.
Oh,
Yes, because I had a
that's
different experience.
hilarious.
I
You're
never
right,
vetted it.
okay.
I
That's
didn't
so funny. Okay,
do due diligence there.
she did not. Okay,
You didn't get any indications from the people that you spoke with in the group that there were any problems. Everybody seemed very welcoming and
yeah,
everybody seemed really like genuinely happy to be there and
yeah,
that gave you good vibes.
exactly, and there was actually a master's student who had done undergraduate research in the lab that was basically in our cohort, because the PhD was mixed with the master's students too, and I one day I pulled her aside, I was like, "Hey, like, I'm getting all of this information from all these people, and I just, like, can you be like, look me dead in the eye and tell me what what do I believe? Like, what am I supposed to believe right now?" And she was like, "I've always had a really good experience, like, I don't know, like, I don't really know what they're talking about. They're not in the lab, how would they know?" And ultimately, she was right. Like, all of these people were it was like, every lab has,
Rumors are
yeah.
rumors.
Right. It's true, but every lab has their problems. Every PI has their problems. All of your coworkers are gonna have their own problems. But it's the problems that you know that you will be able to handle. And the feedback that I had received from all of these people was that the problems that this lab had, I was down to deal with,
And
right?
you know, this really goes back to I think one really good source,
Uh-huh.
just to summarize, are the graduate students
Mhm.
in the lab, if there
Yeah.
are graduate students.
Yeah.
Hopefully there are. If you are dealing with a new professor or a professor who doesn't really have that many
Mhm.
students, then you might be at a loss and you have to go ask other people
Yeah.
and think about that. But having if there are graduate students or postdocs already working in that lab, that's your primary source, right? Treat that
100%.
as like the primary source. And if you can trust them, which you should, because
Yeah.
I think graduate students you can trust because they're not going to try and recruit you unless they really feel like it's a good fit because they're not incentivized to like recruit you. Like if
Yeah.
they're having a bad time, what I'm trying to say with their advisor, they're not going to lie
They're
to
not
you.
gonna they're not gonna try to get you to join their lab
At
usually.
most, they might be reluctant to share a lot.
Right.
Right? At most, they might not have anything bad to say, but they're not singing their advisor's praises
Yeah.
either. That's been my experience.
Yeah.
So, I would say definitely listen to the graduate students, and if you can get comfortable enough with some of them, like, And herein lies what I think the great motive, the great,
Mhm.
great, I think, aim of your rotation is.
Yeah,
Get comfy with the graduate students that
absolutely.
are in the lab because you wanna be so comfortable with them and so vibey with them that they're willing to talk to you,
Yeah,
like, and
exactly,
be real with you, or be as
exactly.
real as they can be
Yeah.
to give you an indication of whether or not it's gonna be a good fit. Because 'cause they're gonna be you get a lot more face time with them than you do
Mhm.
with the PI, and they're ultimately the ones that perspectives really matter.
Yeah.
So, when I went to visitation as well as, like, when I was rotating and I could just sit down with a graduate student and they're
Mhm.
willing to be like, "Hey, just so you know."
Yeah.
My main question for them is always, like, even if everything has been fine so far, my main
Uh-huh.
question is, "Okay, if there's anything that you wanna complain about, like, what is it?"
Yeah.
And they're prepared for that question because
Yeah.
that's a question they would ask too.
Yeah.
So and then they'll tell you because everybody, like Nina said, has flaws. So
Yes.
learn what they are.
Well, and learn what they are, but also know yourself. You
Yes,
have to know
know
yourself
yours.
before you start graduate school. And what I will say is that I dug deep, okay? I was like, what do I need? And I knew that I needed structure, okay? I knew that I needed somebody who had expectations. They were clear expectations that I would be able to meet those expectations, and that was a situation that I would thrive in. And if you want a micromanager, don't join a lab where the PI is not a micromanager. If you need your freedom, do not join the lab of a person who is a micromanager. I mean, it's things like this because you have to know how you're going to thrive,
One man's
right?
trash is another person's treasure. Like, it's
100%.
very, like, there's no hard and fast rule with it.
Mhm.
Gosh, I mean, they don't call it speed dating for nothing. Like, it is
That's what they called
dating.
it.
We
Yeah.
compared it a lot to dating when we were first years, I remember
Did you?
that.
Well,
Not just
yeah.
because we called speed dating or did the department call speed dating speed dating?
I don't think it was a real thing, but so we had faculty they gave 15-minute presentations, and all the first years would have to attend those presentations, and we called it speed dating because 'cause they're trying to sell themselves, and then we'd have pizza afterwards, and then you're trying to sell yourself to
And it's
them.
a relatively short time frame to
Yeah,
get to know the faculty member, so colloquially,
called
some of
speed
us
dating.
refer to it as speed dating
Yeah,
because it felt like we had to very quickly,
yeah,
get to know one another. But
yeah,
basically, you have to choose the faculty member, and that faculty member has to choose you. That fit is really, really important, and it's akin to dating because you have to understand what you need
yeah,
in
a
this
partner.
case, not a partner, but API.
Yeah, so I actually it's funny because we did call it speed dating, but any people who were in, Greek life in undergrad, it's like sorority recruitment, like, you have to have a mutual selection process.
And when the vibes are right.
You know when you know, you
You know
know.
when you know you know.
You know when you know, you know.
That's not the point. The point is everybody has flaws just like every person has flaws,
Yeah,
and you need to find the right person for you. And in this case, like when you're looking at an advisor,
mhm.
this is a person who's supposed to manage you. Like
Yeah,
this is going to be your first manager, right?
yeah,
Like first formal manager. Some managers, as mentioned, will be a bit more
mhm.
not aggressive, micro. Some of them are gonna be more micromanaging, and some people are gonna be more lax, and
Yeah,
you know what? If you thrive in that lax environment, go for the lax
go for
advisor.
it. Yes.
If you don't know what environment you fit in
Mhm,
because you're somebody who hasn't really done that soul searching or you don't really know what that is, like,
mhm.
talk to the like, get to know the people who are working in that lab and who are succeeding in that lab.
Yeah,
Get to know their personalities, talk it out with them. This is,
yeah,
again, why it's really important to get cozy with the graduate students
mhm.
because that's your best resource. This is all you have.
Yeah, exactly, and the thing that I think is important about rotations is, you know, the idea is you're rotating in the lab so that you can understand how the lab functions, and so if you should spend as much time as you possibly can with the lab when you're doing this. Every rotation is different at every school, every lab does rotations differently, but if you can really get in the headspace of what these graduate students experience on a week-to-week basis or day-to-day basis, then if you let you have to listen to your gut. You have to say, "Do I like this? Am I down with this? Or am I down with something else?" Right. So,
Very, very true. So I feel like we talked a little bit, or we talked quite a lot about the advisor, and we talked a little bit about the skills and like in terms of picking research
yeah.
objectives, like going for research that will help you acquire the skills that
Yeah.
you are passionate about and want to utilize later on in your career. I
Mhm.
guess we should also talk a little bit about the lab as far as the other people you're going to be working with,
Right.
outside of your immediate manager,
Okay. Yeah.
because I feel like something that might be overlooked because
Uh-huh.
again, a lot of focus
Mhm.
before you join a specific
Mhm.
department or before when you first get there is on the professor.
Yeah.
First and foremost, I feel like every time I ask a graduate student what they care the most about, it's always like research number one,
Mhm.
usually
Mhm.
manager, boss,
Mhm.
PI number
Yeah.
two, and then I feel like what's oftentimes overlooked is the graduate students or the
Mhm.
environment outside of that in the lab. So, like,
Yeah.
and this can feed into mentorship opportunities as well as like your social
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah.
life quality because
Yeah.
like ultimately you're going to be in lab a lot. We talked
So
about
much.
this, right?
So
Potentially,
much.
interact, or like if you're not in a lab-based
Mhm.
PhD, like you're going to be interfacing with these people the most,
Yes.
okay? So it's really important that you like these people and they want to like you too.
Yeah.
Because the last thing a research group wants to do is let in somebody
Doesn't vibe.
that doesn't vibe.
Like, what our PI always said was, "Would you share a hood with this person?" Because we use fume hoods. So, like, "Would you be okay with sharing a hood with this person? If you would, then that's positive, and we are willing to consider them. If you wouldn't, they're not even on the list."
Lots
Like,
some research is still done really independently, and I
yeah,
get that, but, like, I feel like the world's trajectory is just moving towards a more and more, like, teamwork-based and
collaboration.
collaborative
Mhm.
environment, and so the chances of you having to work with other people during your PhD, or
Mhm.
grad school is quite high. You
Yeah,
really wanna make sure you can work with these people.
right.
You can I always say of the trinity, you got the research, the PI, and then the lab, which is, like, the graduate
Yeah,
student or
yeah.
things outside of
Your
that.
colleagues,
Your
if you will.
colleagues,
Yeah.
maybe you don't have all 3, but you should try and aim for 2 out of the 3, right? Like,
Yeah.
maybe n you I mean, ideally, all 3 are a perfect fit.
Yeah. So what I have heard is you either have to love your research so much that it doesn't matter who you are surrounded by, or you need to love the people enough that they are what get you through the 5 years or more that you're there. Obviously, like Anna said, it's better to have both, but if you neither like your research nor do you like the people you're working with, you're SOL. And, like, your research is gonna fluctuate. You can't rely on your research to get you through the day every day, right?
I agree. I
Yeah,
agree. I think that advice in retrospect, when I
yeah,
think about it, I really think people matter more because I
yeah,
say this because, research is temporary.
yeah,
Some of the connections that my
yeah,
relationship with my boss and that
yeah,
kind of PI student relationship, that's kind of for life. My PI's name will always be associated with me for the rest of my
exactly.
life, and thankfully the people that I knew in the lab, like
Yeah,
these are going to be, I hope, lifelong friends. Um, but my dissertation research, hope I never see her again.
yeah, absolutely not.
Um,
Never reading that document
I
again.
so, like, I really do think that,
Yeah,
yeah, research for me is gonna be on the lower tier, and I think a lot of you passionate people,
mhm,
you're gonna go into this with research
mhm,
being at the forefront of your minds, and I think that's a good thing because you
yeah,
should ultimately do something that you're really excited about, what you're really interested in,
yeah,
but really also hopefully, you know, make sure you're joining an environment that will enable you to do that research because
right,
it's love for that research you might find one day isn't going to get you through the day. That's not gonna
yeah.
give you hugs when you're
It's not
feeling
gonna give you
down,
hugs. No.
you know?
They're
Um,
never gonna sit next to you while you're crying over your column fractions.
no, they're not gonna listen to you. They're not gonna listen
Absolutely
to you
not.
like that. So, yeah, I think those are the things that are, pretty, pretty important,
Yeah.
and, like, research groups have
They
personalities.
do. Well, and I think what I wanted to say kind of in context of what you were saying, how important these people are in your life. So, my husband's graduate school PI was the officiant at our wedding. Like, that's how deep that bond went. Like I said, he joined a new lab. It was like a deep bond that we have with him for life. I mean, he is not just my husband's mentor, he is also my mentor, and his wife is also both of our like you become ingrained in these people's lives, and it is for life. And our PI also came to my wedding, and I we still talk to him. Like, he's a very important part of our life still.
That's the best case scenario is if
Yeah.
they really, like, get integrated and they are
Yeah,
somebody who, like, you can rely on for the rest of your life. I mean,
exactly.
that's the peak and
Yeah,
that's the intent. In reality, that may or may not always be the case with
yeah,
everybody that you meet. Not every PI will have the best intentions,
that's
I
true.
think, that
Yeah.
you encounter, so definitely watch out for that too. Like, you
Mhm.
and I think you'll hopefully, if you're listening to this, you will get a better sense of that as things go on.
Yeah,
But I want everybody to know that the best case scenario is what Nina just described, which is
yeah,
somebody who is going to look out for you both in a career
yeah,
capacity as well as like a personal capacity throughout your life, like mentorship.
yeah.
Like,
Literal
that's
mentorship, yeah.
really, really, really important. It should exist.
Yeah,
You know, I think sometimes for the sake of research, sometimes like we tell ourselves that we can sacrifice certain things.
yeah,
And I just want to encourage everybody to think about mentorship not being something you should sacrifice.
absolutely not.
It's super valuable. It's very rewarding.
Mhm.
It will make or break your research
Experience,
experience.
yeah. So, anyway, so we've spent a lot of time talking about the ins and outs of, my experience and all of the commentary that we could associate with that. But here, Anna, why don't let's talk about what you did. Let's talk about your experience
I'm
choosing a
scared.
lab. Don't be scared. Don't be scared.
I won't be scared because I feel like hopefully this will be a good learning experience for people. Like I think, in contrast to Nina, who I think
Mhm.
did a lot of due diligence, she did all of that, by the way. All of the advice that we gave and all of the,
Yeah.
details that we went through, like she considered all of those details in her selection, and I think she was better off for it. I, on the other hand, chaotic baby girl. As you may or may not recall, I was given advice that I already very quickly was like, you know what? I'm not going to be cautious about this.
It's not.
New lab, no problem.
No problem.
I'm just a fearless, young, first year, no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
You know, looking back, I already see the red flags, the things that may have indicated that this lab was not the right fit for me. Like, not that this lab, you know, was bad or anything like
No.
that. It was just maybe the wrong fit. And things
Yeah.
did turn out for the best
Yeah.
in my personal opinion.
100%. Yeah.
I started rotating in this lab. I was very invested in the research. I felt like it was really cool, but I did a rotation and there were some people in the lab that I vibed with and some people in the lab that I genuinely didn't. Like this
Mhm.
lab had a personality that ultimately did not vibe with me and
Yes.
I arguably did not vibe like
With them.
with them. So I really think it worked both ways
Yeah.
in this case. Like,
Absolutely.
I probably should have recognized that, but I
Yeah.
wanted to push through because I genuinely did like I liked the person that was running the lab
Yeah.
and I also like the research. So I figured a little bit of friction in the lab I was willing to give up or
Yeah.
like not necessarily consider. But I think it's fair to say that when push came to shove, I did my rotations, I did the 3 that I needed to do,
Yeah.
but in my heart of hearts, I really
Mhm.
wanted to join this lab. I
Yeah.
didn't you know, I did everything in my other rotations by the book,
Yeah.
but I was pretty co in my heart, I was like, "I'm not gonna pick the other labs."
Anna took every rotation that she did seriously.
I tried. Yeah, I mean,
You
I
never acted
no,
poorly.
no,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say, like, I didn't take them
Yeah,
seriously.
exactly.
I took them seriously, I did my rotations
Mhm.
the way they were meant to be done. I didn't divide my time. I didn't that's another thing. This is just, like, a pitfall in case you guys think
Mhm.
that you can, like, just because you're really interested in a specific lab and you wanna devote all of your time to that lab, you know, if you're doing a rotation, at least the way in my program did it, where we really do have separate rotations,
Mhm.
don't mix those rotations. Don't try to do work in one lab and also work in another lab.
Yeah.
And I say this just because like it may or may not look bad to the lab that you want to join, but it probably will look bad to the lab that you're currently
Yeah.
rotating in or you're supposed to be rotating in because no lab wants to feel that way.
Yeah.
No lab they might consider it disrespectful
Mhm.
and you don't wanna rub people the wrong way, in
ever.
your first quarter.
Yeah.
That's
Because first years always rub people the wrong way.
yeah.
It doesn't matter. You're always
You're always gonna be a
overzealous.
little annoying, but, like,
Yeah.
don't give other people a reason to,
To
like,
not like
dislike
you.
you
Yeah.
more, right? Like, I would just say try to do
Yeah.
your best to 'cause you never also networking wise, like, you never know who you're gonna encounter in the future, and, like,
Yeah.
first impressions are important, so they may or may not ever forget
Yeah.
that one blunder you made, even if it was innocent, even
Yeah.
if it was
Especially if you have a memory like mine.
right. They
I
may
remember
forgive, but they'll never forget. Okay, so thank you so much for giving me my
Yes.
credit. I would say that this is a good lesson for
Yeah.
everybody. Do your rotations
Take them
take them
seriously
seriously.
because the fact that she did that allowed her.
Saved my ass.
Yes.
We so basically I did kind of put my eggs into one basket because I really only wanted to join this one person's lab, and
Mhm.
this person ultimately at the end of the quarter said no. I picked them, they did not pick me, and I was very, very sad.
In fact, I was going through my dilemma trying to figure out if this PI was what people were saying, which one was right or wrong. So I went to go talk to our graduate program coordinator about this, and Anna walked by, and then she, um,
Right after I was told no.
right after, and she commandeered the entire
Well, I
conversation.
went into the room because the door was open,
I know.
and I was obviously very distraught,
She was,
and I was visibly distraught,
visibly.
and,
There were tears.
I may or may not have made the conversation about me,
She did,
even though and not realizing that there was another conversation that was,
in progress.
underway. So, that was, one of Nina's first impressions of me.
I was not
She was not
happy.
pleased. She was not pleased. Although I will say I was going through it because,
She was.
again, like, I really wanted this lab,
She did.
and by the time I was told no,
Mhm.
um, I was under the impression that the other 2 labs that I had rotated in had kinda made their decisions, and
Yeah.
this was a misunderstanding actually, but I'd watched the other 2 labs already reach out to the people they wanted to take, and I was not one of those people that they reached out to, so I was under the understanding that,
Oh, that's right.
that all 3 of the labs
Oh,
that I rotated in had made their decision, and I wasn't going to be one of them. So
right. 'Cause you made a miscalculation.
I did.
Yeah.
Well, I did so I'm saying that it was an error, but to
Yeah,
be fair, it was very late in the
it
game,
was.
and I had received no indication
Yeah.
from any of those 2 other professors that I was even under consideration.
Yeah.
That could be miscommunication on my part, and that could also be miscommunication on their part. So it was late in the game, and the 3 people that were my first top 3 choices were
Mhm.
not interested in me.
Yeah.
I did see somebody else during speed dating that I was potentially interested in, and
Mhm.
so I was like, "I'm gonna reach out to this professor and see if this person could potentially take me."
Mhm.
Even though I hadn't rotated formally in this person's lab,
Yeah.
I had watched their speed dating presentation. I thought the research could be interesting, and I
Mhm.
had a meeting with them shortly after I commandeered Nina and our graduate student coordinator's conversation. And that meeting was positive. That
Yeah.
meeting was positive. The project that they pitched to me seemed interesting.
Mhm.
I felt like eh, eh, but to be fair, like, honestly, when you're in a desperate situation of your own making, um, anything feels good in that moment. So that's another caveat that I wanna throw out there. Like, another cautionary tale I wanna throw out there is, like, when you are in that situation, anything will feel good because you
And
need it to be good, you know?
but to also though, to your credit, that lab vibe
That
was
lab
lit,
that lab
okay?
that lab vibe was
Like,
lit. They were all cool people.
everyone was cool.
Everyone was cool.
It was a good vibe.
That was never the problem.
Exactly.
The lab
So,
dynamic
was
was peak,
peak,
and
yeah.
I did really, like actually, one of those people that I met through this, PI that I did not end up staying with is currently still an amazing friend,
Exactly.
friend of the pod. That also definitely
Yeah.
fed into that decision and all of that. So I just wanted to paint this picture of like, yes, 3 PIs that I wanted to join already made their decision in my head. I'm going to say yes to this PI. After our initial meeting, I
Mhm.
asked this advisor if they could be my advisor, and
Mhm.
they agreed.
Mhm.
So I joined their lab. And literally right after we made this agreement, my second choice advisor, this advisor had already reached out to 3 other people before me, okay, to ask them to join his lab. And
One of them was me.
I did not know, there
Yeah.
was no universe in my head that he would want 4 students.
Yeah.
I thought after he asked the 3 students, and I heard about this from other people, that it was done, which is why I thought that he would never reach out to me
Yeah.
and that it was over. But he reaches out to me literally 5 minutes after. It felt like I agreed to be in this other person's lab,
Damn.
to ask me to be in his lab.
I don't think I knew that.
And I, being the idiot that I am, said, "Well, I already said yes to the other person." And
Dude.
I here's what I will say about myself. I have a lot, like, I consider myself to be a good person, and I have a lot of, I have weird integrity. There are certain things that I
It was
just
a
feel
loyalty thing.
like I have to be loyal about. And,
Yeah.
like, I maybe not about everything in life, but in certain things, yo, I was on one. I
She
was
was
on one. I was like, "I've met this other PI all of 3 days, and I am a ride or die."
dude,
So
that's crazy.
I
I
cannot
don't think I
imagine
knew
saying no
that.
and going back on this decision, after
Yeah.
I've already verbally agreed. So he was very understanding. My second choice was very understanding. He was like, "Okay, you know what? I get it. That's cool." And, he let me go.
Yeah.
To continue and then hopefully get to the end of this story, I worked with this advisor, my 4th choice advisor, for a quarter. And a quarter into it, I was not digging the research. I was
Mm.
really not digging the research. There were a lot of different things about the research that I learned over time was not the right fit for
Yeah,
me, and I don't
definitely.
wanna go into it too much,
Yeah.
because I don't want to ultimately, like, hurt anybody's feelings. I just think it was a bad fit.
But ultimately, she wasn't doing organic synthesis, and that was what she came to do.
This is true, and I felt like I wasn't gaining those skills.
Yeah.
I was frustrated because I felt like on some level my research wasn't progressing as quickly as some of
Mhm.
my classmates' research that were going in other
Mhm.
labs, and I really regretted my decision of saying no to that second advisor.
Yeah.
This was
Yeah.
existentially, this was really hard for me to accept
Yeah.
because this was something that was not easy for
It
me.
was not.
But how I arrived at this conclusion was thankfully I had a great graduate advisor. So something that a lot of people don't know is in graduate school, you actually have 2 advisors. You have your research advisor and you have your graduate advisor. And it is really important that you know who they are,
Yeah.
okay? And the reason why you have 2 is because your research advisor, while it's great and is gonna be good at guiding your research, may or may not always be good at being your graduate advisor,
Yeah.
okay? And your graduate advisor is there to talk to you about what courses you should take,
Yeah.
how to navigate your research,
Yeah.
from an unbiased point of view,
Yeah.
which I think is really, really awesome. So please take advantage of your graduate advisor.
Yeah.
My graduate advisor helped me navigate this situation, gave me advice, and ultimately emboldened me
Yeah.
to make a move because on my own, you're
You wouldn't have
scared,
done
like,
it,
you're
yeah.
first year, like, you have no idea what options are ahead of
Mhm.
you. Your graduate advisor's job is to give you your options, to be able to tell you, "Hey, this is
Yeah.
how other people have navigated out of this in the
Yeah.
program." My graduate advisor helped me, like, talk to other graduate students that ultimately changed labs or, like, found out later on in their graduate careers that their lab wasn't for them and made moves,
Yeah.
and then connecting with those students helped me make this decision and then opened my eyes to the fact that, "Oh, I do have agency."
Right.
I
Exactly.
have a choice.
This goes back to, I don't know when we talked about this, but at some point you can make these choices. Like, people are going to tell you, oh, you can't do that. Oh, that's not a good idea. That's going to stunt your progress. That's going to do this, that, or whatever. But you need to do what's right for you. And she did what was right for her.
And what was right for me was ultimately, I went back to my second choice advisor,
Mhm.
and I basically, I always say this, I begged for a spot back. I
She
was
did.
basically like, I want everyone to understand it is not easy to go back to somebody that you've said no to,
Yeah.
okay, to ask for this. But I really, I did it because I was like, it's more important that I'm on the right path than it is for me to like maintain a sense of integrity or
Yeah.
loyalty or pride or whatever it is holding me
Mhm.
back. It doesn't matter. I'm going to just go into that office. I arranged a meeting with them and I said, I'm not having like I'm stressed out.
Yeah.
This I made the wrong choice.
Mhm.
Can I have a position in your lab still?
Yeah.
And he made me wait a little bit. He said he'd think about it, and shortly afterwards in our next meeting, he said, "Yes, it would be okay." And I think he wanted to check in with the senior
The
lab
senior grad
students
students,
in his
which
lab.
I was
He
not.
consulted his lab about it, or some of the members in his lab about it to make
Mhm.
sure that because they vetted me during my rotation. Because
Yeah.
remember, I rotated, and that's
Right.
why Nina wanted to point out that I did a good
Mhm.
rotation
Yeah.
because ultimately I did something right
Yeah.
for those people in his lab to be
Mhm.
like, hey, she wasn't problematic when she
Mhm.
rotated with us. She
Mhm.
seems like she would be a good fit.
And we were taking his class and we were killing it.
And I
We
did,
were killing it.
thankfully, I did okay. Like,
You were doing well.
I mean,
We were neck and neck.
my first exam wasn't good. I was like, "Oh no." I got a mediocre first exam score and
Mhm.
I like clawed my way back up to
Yeah.
being neck and neck with you or whatever. So
Yeah.
like basically, thankfully between my grades,
Yeah.
my performance in my classes, both from my first quarter and
Mhm.
my second quarter, as well as just the feedback that he had gotten from his students on
Yeah.
my rotation experience, he took me back and
He did.
thank God because I was honestly from then on, I was good.
She was. It was, yeah, it was.
I was good.
And remember, she'd interrupted my conversation. So
So, yes, the reason why we have to qualify that he didn't consult everybody in his lab is because he had just taken 2 first years,
Mhm.
in total for that cycle,
Mhm.
and one of them was Nina, and,
And
sh
I was caught by surprise when I heard, because she didn't tell me. And we were TAing together.
we weren't, like, good friends.
We had
We
we've
weren't good
graded
friends.
together a couple
Yeah.
times,
I
but
had to keep it hush hush because I didn't know, like, here's the thing,
Right.
how embarrassing would it be if I told
I
everybody this?
know.
And then he said no, like, that would be really embarrassing. That would
It's
be
true.
putting the cart
Ca
before the horse.
Yeah, I was shook that she was joining the lab.
Yeah.
I was
I think she would have liked to be consulted, but the reason why she wasn't consulted is because in
I was
our
a
lab,
child. Like,
yeah, like,
what do why do
why
they
would
care
you
what I
consult the
think?
first
Yeah.
year is kind of the
Yeah.
idea, right? And I think that ultimately, thank God they didn't consult you because
Because I would have said
you would have
no.
said no.
I
She
would
would
have
have
said
100% no said no.
no. Yeah.
And, I want everyone to understand in the context of our relationship that
Uh-huh.
I was completely oblivious to the fact that she felt
That
slighted.
she interrupted my
I was
conversation.
oblivious. I was
Yeah.
just in my feelings, so I wasn't like, I didn't know she
Yeah.
never, like, voiced to me that she was bothered by me barging into her conversation and, like, completely commandeering it,
Yeah.
and also, I didn't realize that, like, she wasn't consulted, so, like, she also
Yeah.
I thought that our advisor consulted the entire lab.
The other thing about why I
Well,
felt the way I
the other
did.
thing is she's a fake ass bitch, and she would never, like, she didn't give me any indication probably during that conversation that she was annoyed.
I'm not gonna, like, she was in her feelings. And the thing
She
is,
just allowed me to pour my heart
I
out to her.
did. It's fine. No, but this is what I'll say. The thing is, like, I'm not gonna be like, I'm not gonna cause drama when there doesn't need to be drama. I'm not gonna tell her. I'm not working with her. Why would I have to tell? I'm gonna be great with her a couple times. And then all of a sudden she's in my lab. And then I was like, okay, I need to, like, I'm gonna work with this person for 5 years. Like, I should
She
probably
needed to get it off her
I
chest.
needed to I needed to, make friends. So it was very it was a surprise to her that I had any feelings. But the other reason that I was so shook was because like, at our core, based on what you may or may not have noticed from this podcast, like she's fucking chaotic. And I don't like that much chaos. Like we're just fundamentally very different. And so like I was watching her chaotic behavior for like 2 straight quarters. And I was like, damn, could not be me. Like, I just was
Couldn't imagine in a scenario where she and I would even be in the same place. Like, how could we ever be the same? And then here I was, 2 quarters later, side by side.
Yeah.
No,
Oh,
I
that's
think
so
that
funny.
I think that really, I mean, that highlights a huge part of it. Like, I feel
Yeah.
like a big part of our dynamic was
Mhm.
me doing things differently than you,
Yeah.
and then somehow we're still
On the same path.
we're still here,
Like, it
and
was
that blew your mind.
I was like, what is she doing?
What is going
What's
on?
going on? Like,
But I
yeah.
think that taught you, like, that, like, there
Yeah.
are
There's what the awful saying, there's like several ways to skin a cat or whatever. I'm
or just,
sorry.
like,
We love
different
cats,
ways
but
of, like, achieving the same goal,
yeah,
and I feel like
exactly.
that was a valuable lesson for you.
Yes.
I always knew that. That's why I'm a chaotic, crazy person.
Yes, it's
But
true.
yeah, that's basically my story in a
Yeah.
nutshell. Like to be fair, and just on the subject of changing labs, just
Yeah.
if you do your rotation and you do get it wrong, it's not a dead end. Like you
Yeah.
obviously like it's never a dead end. Every
Yeah.
program has a mechanism for you to do something
Switch.
different or go somewhere else and take the time. Oh, you can even redo your rotations. You don't have to make a
Yeah.
decision right away. You don't have to do
Right.
it the way that I did it. You
Yeah.
can straight up be like, I would like to rotate in 3 more labs,
Yeah.
or 2 more labs or 1 more lab and like see how it goes. Like
Yeah.
that's okay too.
For our program specifically, we only had 1/4 rotation, but in a lot of other programs or departments, they have 1 year rotations. For
Yeah.
instance, like UCSF, the students will do a quarter in one lab and then a quarter in another lab and then a quarter in another lab.
This is
And
common in a lot of bio
in
programs.
bio programs, exactly. With that being said, you can still graduate in 5 years if you don't have that time, because I feel like you accelerate so fast after having experience, like whether it's through a rotation or in your actual lab, that you really don't really start doing good work until summer after your first year,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
So
Like, because yeah,
you're too busy.
your first year is really honestly like you should focus on your classes. You should focus on
Yeah.
gaining some of the soft skills you're going to be using throughout the
Mhm.
rest of your time there. So like,
Yeah.
don't. It felt bad. Like
Of course.
I'm gonna be
Yeah.
real. Like it felt pretty awful. That's why I couldn't tell anybody because
Yeah,
it
I
was
know.
embarrassing.
I
That's
know.
why I told you that, and that was me being vulnerable.
I
Because if I
know.
can say that I was embarrassed, like
Yeah.
that's me being pretty vulnerable. And like you're embarrassed because like you made the wrong choice.
Yeah.
Like you and you thought you made an informed decision too.
Right.
Like you thought you were being informed.
Yeah.
I'm not an I'm chaotic, but like I did my best. Like
Yeah.
I had a method. It wasn't Nina's method, but like my method
Yeah.
like ultimately led me down that path and like
Yeah.
I was upset about it,
Of course.
you
Well,
know?
it was wild. I mean, but I think you were a good success story though in the changing of labs.
And I always like to tell this story to first years and people who are visiting because I want them to know that in the moment it's going to feel like the pressure's on and you need to find the right fit or
Yeah.
else you're going to like combust,
Yeah.
but don't let that drive you into making a decision that may like be too like making that decision too quickly
Yeah.
or before you're ready because you might
Yeah.
have to go at your own pace and like you might have to date around a while, for lack of a better word, rotate
There
around a
are better
while,
words, but
um,
yeah.
before you find the lab that's best for
Yeah.
you.
And also, we kind of what we said in our mental health episode, right? Like nothing that happens in graduate school is going to have that huge of an impact on the rest of your career, because there's so many things that can happen. You can do everything right, because arguably I did everything right. Like we've talked about this. I did not make the right choice for my postdoc. And, that's embarrassing for me. That's my embarrassment. That like I, threw caution to the wind and I was like, I'm good. I can just do whatever. Like I did not do my due diligence the way that I, would have in the past. And there's a lot of reasons that we've talked about already about that. But
You
you
can
know?
make mistakes
Yeah.
at any level.
And then you can leave the country. Like, just leave your mistakes in the United States. But
So, moral of the story is, make your mistakes and
yeah.
leave the country. But
No!
also, nothing lasts forever.
Take your time to understand who you are, what environments you thrive in, and also give yourself the grace to make mistakes because
I made him,
she sure did.
and so can you.
Exactly.
Thank you, everybody who's been listening to our podcast so far. We really appreciate your support. If you'd like us to keep going, one of the best ways to show your support, do us a favor, please like, comment, or subscribe just to show us a little bit of interest. Let us know if we're going in the right direction or if we're veering very, very far off
Of course.
course.
Yeah, because we will still keep talking, as you
Yeah,
can see.
yeah,
We
we
can
won't stop until we're told to stop.
yeah, but don't tell us to stop.